What's up? I'm back. Welcome to Siris King. In this segment, I'm going to talk about spirituality, um, why it's useless in its current form or the way it's being taught. And I was gonna make it, obviously, I don't really do spiritual videos as much anymore. That's why you don't really see as much content in this channel, at least when it comes to spiritual stuff. Um, but somebody asked me, "Oh, how come you don't? How come you kind of down on spirituality?" I'm like, damn, I hate the way it's being perceived. I'm not down on spirituality at all. Spirituality to me is just different than spirituality for most people. For most people, when they think of spirituality, they think of something that just speculates a lot on abstract concepts. So because they speculate so much on abstract concepts, what ends up happening is that a lot of concepts that they should get, right? Physical concepts they don't get, or they either run from, or they dismiss because they think they're above certain concepts, right? So they won't talk about politics. They wouldn't talk about even cultures. They wouldn't talk about everyday things that, in a sense, when you understand spirituality, you understand that the spiritual world gave birth to the physical world. So the physical world is part of the spiritual world. That's a difference. But you wouldn't really understand that because, from your point of view, spirituality is just running to the unseen world. And the crazy part of it is, even when you say the unseen world, even that's random because what is the unseen world? Is the unseen world the world of atoms because we can't see them with our naked eyes, right? Is the unseen world bacteria? Is the unseen world dark matter? Is the unseen world you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's obviously worlds in between the unseen and seen, that all bacteria, atoms, dark matter, these are things that science knows exist, especially when it comes to bacteria and atoms, right? If you look at the world from that point of view, it's not visible to the naked eye, but it's still a factor, right? Meaning you physically know it exists. Dark matter, we probably know it exists, right? So when you look at it from that point of view, you say, damn, even when we talk about the physical world, it's still, and versus the unseen world, there's obviously worlds in between, or concepts in between. And the larger problem is that people don't really realize, if you're practicing if you're practicing real spirituality, I'm talking about real spirituality, you would know that, number one. Number two, you would understand that no matter what, obviously something happened, right? Obviously, humanity used to be on a higher level, and we're not on that level anymore. Whether you want to call it the fall, whether you want to call it just the empire, the age of myths, right? We're just in a different age astrologically, and we're in a different age astrologically. Some concepts can't be understood. That could be true too, right? When you look at it from that point of view, you say, wow, it's crazy, because then you start to realize that there's something wrong with the way it's delivered, the way it's taught, because the way it's taught is coming from a human construct. So when I say human construct, understand what a construct is, right? A construct is when the first constructs a person sees is what? Cultural, right? Social. There's social construct is when maybe rich people do this, maybe poor people do this, maybe middle class people do this. Maybe if you're rich but you grew up poor, you still do certain behavior that somebody who was rich for 4 generations won't do. Those are the first constructs you meet. Then you get into it keeps going. Then you get into gender constructs. You get into racial constructs, and yeah, race is a construct too. It's a concept that's real, right? In the sense that we've accepted it. So you can't say it's not real if you accepted it. I could talk about scientifically, we all one race, all I want. We are, but at the same time, people in the world haven't seen that. So all because something is a construct, it doesn't mean it's not real. What it means is you're not supposed to be trapped by it. That's the difference. And that's why I think people mistake. When I say something is a construct, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that when you're saying spirituality, remember, if the present universe started about 13 billion years ago, the earth started about 4 billion years ago, the human species, if I'm talking about humans as Homo erectus and Homo sapiens, you're talking about 2.5 million years, right? And probably even less than that. If I added Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, maybe we start going genius Homo, you go back further. But let's just say for now, I say 2.5 million years. 2.5 million years is not even 10% of 4 billion, right? Not even close. In fact, it's not even 1%. So when you look at it from that point of view, if you're going into the human construct, and you get locked into the human construct, it's very hard to practice proactive spirituality. And at first, that wasn't hard. That was addressed because at first, most people don't really realize the older spiritual systems didn't get into the deep stuff that people attempt to get into. So if you never mastered, and I've been guilty of this myself, if you never mastered 7 chakras, telling someone about 13 chakras or even an 8th chakra probably is not the best thing. Right, so I'm not saying this as a person who's not guilty of it. I will get into the solar body, the Gnostics, and the 8th chakra. But I'm like, wait a minute, humans haven't even 7 chakras is a challenge. Like, most people are only using 2 or 3. It's a challenge to clear out all 7 and to get the energy going from the root to the crown. When that happens, people worship such individuals, right? And that individual is just in the beginning of what they are. So when you look at it from that point of view, you start to say, oh wow. Spiritual systems, especially as you get younger, especially when you start to get into the New Age construct, you get into the conscious community construct, you even get into the modern occultist construct. Meaning, if you're from an occult society or initiate society that's real, like if you're from a real initiate society of occultists, it's different. You're taught by people who know what they're doing, and in a sense, automatically, you don't rush anything. Like that's why initiates can actually like be in pure and plain sight. People don't see them because those guys are studying plants and they study astrology, but they study astronomy as well. Like they study a lot of stuff that when I look at people in the New Age and the conscious community and everything in between, they're not into that. Everybody wants to get into aliens quickly. Everybody wants to get into elementals quickly. And again, whether those things exist or not, the problem is that when you're looking at them from a human concept or from a human understanding, right? And I'm saying human. The crazy part of it is most people can't even get past their cultural constructs. That's the crazy part. Like, if you look at it real carefully, I'm saying human constructs started 2.5 million years ago. Come on. Who really even goes back 250,000 years? And you know how you know that? Perfect example. The Egyptians. They looked at everything as, let's say, 7 dimensions, and everything has a representative of each dimension, right? So if I say Ra could be the sun, Ra could be like life force. You could say solar energy, but even really more life force. It goes even beyond the sun, right? So it could be life force. It could be the sun. It could be the intelligence or the spirit of the sun, as the Paleros and the people who do Opia understand. Everything in nature has a spirit, right? It could be all 3 of those things. But when you look at it from a Western mindset, whether you're white or black, what do you say? Either you worship Ra as a god only, or you worship Ra as a mental faculty only. When the people who you're taking it from saw it as all. Remember, it had a representative of all 7 layers. So, you know what I always use it for this example? Take alchemy for this example, right? Kundalini in India, right? Jing in Taoism, right? Kind of the same thing as in alchemy, you would say etheric salt, right? So an alchemist would say etheric salt. And then when they say etheric salt, the reason why they say salt, because salt can be analyzed in a laboratory, right? Salt or sodium, it can be analyzed, right? So it has a spiritual spiritual counterpart, but it has a physical counterpart that can be analyzed, so it could exist in all worlds. And it has, obviously, its spirit. When you say Kundalini, it's harder to measure Kundalini. So that's what the Egyptians were coming on. They were coming on always operating on all levels at the same time. So Ra could be 3 or 4 different things. But when you're coming from the Western construct, which is what? What's the Western construct? Maybe you started with the Greeks, right? In the modern times. We're talking about, and again, if you come from Western culture, you come from the Western construct, whether you like it or not, right? You come from the Western construct. So you come in and say, all right, Ra is this, he's just a mental faculty, or he just chi, or he just solar energy. No, Ra is like probably 7 different things. Like I'm saying 3. The Egyptians always did things on 7 layers, so it's probably 7 things, right? So it's probably 3 or 4 other things that they depicted Ra as, or Ra is symbolic of that you're not even seeing yet. But when you're coming from a construct that's only 2,000 years old, and the Egyptian construct is probably 5 or 10,000 years old, you miss. And 2,000-year-old construct is still closer to 5,000 years than, which let's say Kemet is 10,000 years old. I mean, yeah, you could go back further, but let's just say for now, which most people would agree with, 5 to 10,000 years, and the Western construct is 2,000 years. That's 8,000 year difference, and you're still messing it up. So let alone getting into concepts and understanding energies and types of consciousness and vibrations that are talking about way before Egypt and Sumeria, way before Atlantis. Now, if you don't think Atlantis existed, better for me. You're talking about Sumer, you're talking about 20,000, 30,000 years ago. But spirituality, what is true spirituality supposed to do? Heal you first, right? Teach you about yourself, which your culture, your gender is part of that. and then keep going and go further than that. The problem is most spiritual people get locked into their time. They get locked into even just a limited perception. So what happens with spirituality, and this is how you know something is wrong, it gets taught either to run, right? You either get taught to run, you get taught escapism, or even worse, you get taught a superiority over nature. So the superiority over nature is what I'm going to go into. The human looks at it and says, well, the human being is superior because we could think, we could talk, we have a logical mind. So we're superior in nature. And this is where you run into problems because you understand that mindset, and I hear people, even people of so-called color, right? You always, this is why people have to kind of understand it's about reality. There's a truth and there's a universal truth. You can talk about you're superior to any race, but all you guys do the same thing at the end of the day. Because if you look at the older spiritual systems, if you look at various types of shamanism and animism and bush medicine and nature magic, right? What would they say? They would say, oh, plants, animals, those are the first teachers. Some people even get into rocks. Some people get into, it depends where, volcanoes and mountains, right? Those are the first teachers. We actually learn from those constructs because those constructs are older than us. And we sometimes you just meditate on those things. You might meditate looking at birds. You might meditate looking at whoever, trees, right? Get inspired by them, right? To a lot of people spiritually, that sounds like crazy talk. If you tell the average person that spiritually, why do they want to hear about chakras and the power of the mind? Because they think that because they have a mind, they're superior. That's why. And then those will be the same people who look down on scientists and say scientists are coming from a limited point of view, which I'm not gonna say they're not. But the problem is you're looking just like scientists too. Why? Because the difference between you and the scientists, you ask most scientists, right? Especially if they're physicists, especially if they're geologists, right? They're gonna say chemists. They're gonna say, listen, there's nothing special about humanity. Seriously, you know what they admit is more special? The Earth is special. That's what people don't really realize. To science, the Earth is special because for whatever reason, an environment where complex life can thrive is blooming on Earth, where you don't see that in other systems. Look at our solar system. There's not anything even close to this. That's why Earth is special. That matches what the Kabbalists and the Sufis say. Like if you go into real serious Kabbalah and Sufism and Hermeticism, they'll be like, yeah, there's life on other planets. And the people profess that they're into all this ancient knowledge. And if you look at those systems, they'll be like, yeah, there's life in other planets, but there's more simple life. Doesn't that match science? Where science says if you get life, it's going to probably be archaea and bacteria and microbe. And microbial life is not going to be complex eukaryotic organisms like us. That matches exactly what scientists say, right? So when you look at it, science is now moving past the ancients. No, I'm sorry, not the ancients. Science is moving past modern spiritual systems, and it's obvious. Why? Because the scientists, like if you went to the shaman and you said, or the medicine man, or the bush, or the sangoma, or the bushman, or bushwoman, or the shamanist, and you say, wow, scientists are saying Earth is the one that's kind of unique, not the human being. Scientists, the shaman will say, yeah, you know what? Those scientists boys are kind of getting it right now, right? Then you take that same person and you hear all these things that people talk about, whether it's an indigo child or whether I'm a god because my colors, my skin color is a certain level, and you look at them and you be like, and then the shaman will be like, just shake their head. That's exactly what happened. They would just shake their head, right? Why? Because even when people don't really realize that if you get your scientific hat on and you understand that human beings are mammals, you will see that any animal on Earth fulfills a function to nature and kind of knows instinctively. They can't tell you logically. An elephant can't tell you logically that when they take a shit, right, there's like 10 other organisms that need the elephant shit, right? Elephant can't tell you that logically, but it knows it instinctively. So when you look at it, the human being is the only species on Earth that doesn't know that. So the human being will actually take a spiritual system and say, okay, I'm going to run now. I'm going to project my mind, my mental body through my crown chakra, and I'm going to leave. I'm going to escape as fast as I can. There's no species that will do that. And the human will do it when they're not even finished doing their duty first. That's the thing, right? So when you look at it, that's because, is it a human fault? No, it's a teacher's fault, because the teachers are not teaching people the correct way. They either teach them escapism, which I actually prefer than the other half, where they teach this kind of superiority. Because sometimes I hear people talk about the West, and the Western civilization, and they think they're superior to nature. Like, I love when I hear this shit. I hear this crap all the time. Western civilization thinks they're superior to nature, and people use that to attack certain races, certain groups, but then do the same thing. If you come in and say, well, you know, Ra is not really about the force of nature, what Ra represents, or the 7 different layers of Ra. It's more about what Ra means. And Ra is probably a bad example because they understand it's an energy, right? But if you take a faculty like Osiris or Isis, right, they wouldn't really understand that when you just have that as a mental faculty in your mind, that's still human superiority, because you're saying animals, plants, rocks can't do that because they don't have those same mental faculties. You know what the problem is, right? Is that if you understand it the way the Bushmen, the Songomos would say, they would say, listen, let's keep it real right now. If you took out humans from nature, nature would still live. If you took humans out, nature would still live. It might even be better. If you took nature, humans can't survive without nature. It's a big difference, right? So when you look at it from that point of view, you understand that if I say humans if I say humans evolve from certain species, right? If you say humans evolve from certain rodents, certain primates, like, certain types of apes and bonobos and certain type of gorillas, right? If humans come from these things, rodents, fish, right? Some humans, fish. Some humans were descendants of, fish-like creatures, worms, right? There's some humans that all humans may start out as worm-like creatures first. All humans start out as simple cells first, right? So if you say all humans start these things first, then those things are you. If that makes any sense. So if you say, well, I'm superior to a simple cell, how could you be the superior to a simple cell if you couldn't exist without the simple cell? You're just a grown-up simple cell. You're just a grown-up rodent. You're just a grown-up ape. You're just a grown-up fish. You're just a grown-up part of these things, right? That's all you are. And anytime you see animal species like a dog or a cat that doesn't doesn't have a purpose in the ecosystem, is because humans have engineered that animal. But every animal knows their purpose. Fish knows they got to clean up the sea. They know that. They can't tell you it. They just know it instinctively by operating the way they operate. So when you are having a spiritual system, the spiritual system is supposed to kind of have your mind looking at it like that. Like, I'm supposed to be able to look at the worms and fish and some simple cells and be like, oh, that's me. And I don't mean that's me as we're all one, because then you get that. No, I mean in terms of the same way how I could look at an 8-year-old version of myself, right? Like when I was 8 years old, I could look at the picture and say, that person is me. It's the same thing, right? The minerals become plants, the plants become animals, the animals become human, right? So you can't be superior to something that is you. That if you take that away, you couldn't exist anymore. That's the difference. And that sounds simple. It's not, because you'd be surprised how many people. There'll be even spiritual systems that will come and hear this and say, well, humans never came from animals. We just were. Even if you believe that, you can't say that about simple cells, though. Believe it or not, because those same people will talk about, oh, the mitochondrial DNA is only passed through the woman, and that's how you know that woman came first. And well, like, guess what? Mitochondria, believe it or not, used to be a simple cell. Science has kind of proven that, or on the way to proving that. Mitochondria used to be a simple cell. So if there was no simple cells, there would be no mitochondria. There's no mitochondria. Your eukaryotic complex cell could not fuel itself. It couldn't power itself. In fact, oxygen that we have now was first made because of simple cells. At one time, the planet had a more atmosphere of nitrogen and methane. The simple cells came in. The blue algae came in, which is really not really blue algae the way people think. Is actually big bacteria. They came in and made oxygen. Then the plants came in, and then the plants took care of the rest. The plants produced more oxygen for us, right? So when you look at that from that point of view, you say, oh shit, these things even produce oxygen. Then we have things like pranayama yoga, which is what the spiritual system is based on breathing. If there's no oxygen, those things never did that. You could not even do your yoga that you're talking about. So it's in a sense, and a type of awareness that a person is supposed to have, which is almost common sense, that they don't have a spiritual, like spiritual systems don't teach people that common sense. That's the difference. And that's why I said, a real occult society, a real initiate society, because you get some societies now that may say they're initiate societies, but they're still coming from a very human construct. And even then, I would still rather somebody, if somebody told me, I would still rather them go to those things than the even more modern stuff like the conscious community and New Age community. And the reason why that is because the more modern these spiritual systems get, it seems like the more corrupt they get. Which, not corrupt as an evil, but the more quick fixes, or the more, because again, why? The more modern it is, the closer it is to the younger the construct. Remember, spirituality is, if you say spirituality gave birth to the physical world, and spirituality in this current reality, this current Big Bang was 13 billion years ago, spirituality is supposed to go back to that point. Even if spirituality can't go back to that point, even if spirituality only starts with the Earth is 4 billion years old, 4.6. And if you say 10% of that, 10% of that is 460 million years, right? Humans are dealing with 2.5 million. So when you're talking, so the younger the construct you get, the harder it is to go back. And because the spiritual systems don't see that, why you think the Buddha said, listen, I love Hinduism, but it's time to forget all the speculative stuff. You know, when people come to me asking me about the flat earth theory, you know why I haven't asked it? You know why I haven't even touched that yet? I don't even really plan to. Is because when you look at it from this point of view, in the old days in the East, when you talk about spirituality in the East, you learn healing. The East was known all over the world for the place of Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine. Like, the East was known to be extraordinary healers, right? And if you go to the Orient, you're fusing that with martial arts, right? So you would study martial arts, you study healing, then you study spiritual applications. And even then, you notice Buddha, Taoism, they don't really talk about speculative stuff as much. You get the speculative stuff from Hinduism, and even then, the New Age community would take Hinduism and make it more speculative. And what happens is, I could look at the magnetic field of the body, right, as a person who studies healing, and be like, oh shit, okay, the human body has a magnetic field. The human body's magnetic field is not the same as ferromagnetism. And ferromagnetism, which is more iron and steel products, right, or metals, those magnets stay magnetized. The type of magnetic body, the type of magnetic field the human body has is only magnetic if we stay on Earth. That's why if we go in space, our magnetic field be all messed up, and then you could die just off that. Science five doesn't really get that right as much, right? You know, you have magnetic fields that only magnetize when you're in a bigger magnetic field. So a lot of people understand if the Earth wasn't around, the magnetic field will be totally different than what it is now. So as a healer, or not even as a healer, as someone who just studies healing, I understand that naturally without getting into all the other crazy stuff. But people will talk about this and that, and they will understand that if you're taking, even when you tell me the ancients said the earth was flat, you got to be careful. When you look at the ancient concepts, they looked at things very different. That's the difference. Like, if you say the ancients didn't believe in space, they didn't believe in time, be very careful, because the way they looked at time and space, yes, you would get shamans who say time is an illusion. But the same shaman would say, no, time exists. The way you see it's an illusion. But then somebody quoting it would say, the shaman said time is an illusion. So again, because we haven't battled our own constructs, and trust me, we haven't as a human, as any race, right? Any culture in human in the world right now has not really engaged their cultural constructs the way they're supposed to. Why? Because name any culture that you have writers ripping apart the cultural foundation. You get that in the West sometimes, people challenging American culture, then other people saying you anti-American. You go to any other culture, you don't see that. Why? People are not, you don't see it. Like, if you say you're born in Venezuela, you're born in Russia, you just take that for what it is and you don't challenge it. You don't challenge what that culture does wrong. So if you can't even do that, how are you supposed to, and those cultures are like not even 2,000 years old, maybe Russian culture is, maybe. How are you supposed to really understand spirituality? So for me, when I'm looking at that, I'm like, okay, you know what? Science is getting better. And because science is too rigid, yes, study yoga, but study it the way Buddha said to study it. Get out the speculative stuff, right? Learn about your chakras, right? Learn about, in a sense, reactivating your chakras so you can heal yourself, so your perception changes. So that then when you use that with science, you become a better person and you could do better things in the world. But if you're just using it to be swagged up, no, it becomes counterproductive. And at least with science, because you got to work so hard, it's hard to be swagged up in science. Hard. There's no question, and when a person says plant, scientists begin into angiosperms and mosses and ferns, and you actually have to get more tactical in science. There is no such thing as swag, right? So yoga works as long as you do it where you're not, like I said, do it the way Buddha said. Be careful with the speculative stuff. Do it to transform. And understand, even when you're saying yoga in itself and you say, well, I'm going back to India, you talk about 10,000 years, that's nothing compared to intelligences of nature that are talking about 150 million years, 100 million years old, 300 million years old. Like, you talking about something from the East that started 100,000 years ago, which it didn't. But let's just say it started 100,000 years ago. That's nothing. And the fact that people will hear that and get offended by it, it's because they don't understand that they're so used to this human construct of spirituality that it's impossible to really be spiritual with a purely human construct. Like I said, if the spiritual system is taught to you correctly, you would become a better human by understanding the construct you're coming from. That's the difference. You understand the construct you're coming from, then you go back and you could understand other type of human constructs. Then you go into animals, then you go back into plants, then you go back into minerals. Is there any coincidence that some people say alchemy is the highest science, maybe the oldest science? What do alchemists do? Minerals and metals are the supreme substances in those things, right? Minerals and metals are like God in alchemy. In astrology, the planets are like that. The planets, the way the planets affect us is like that. There's no escapism in those two arts, which is older than a lot of other sciences, that spiritual sciences that people are talking about. You go into animism, even worse. Shamanism, even worse. You talking about, they say the plants and minerals and rocks are our teachers. So there is no, not only there's no escapism, there is no superiority in those things. They look at nature as partners. That's it. The same way how you could be a scientist, you make a great finding, but you wouldn't have found it without your assistant. That's the difference. And because that is such a simple concept and people still can't get it, I'm like, you know what? Definitely put the magic down, put the indigo stuff down, get into some science. If you want to get into some kind of stuff that's not tangible, study the mind from a psychological point of view. You want it to be a little tint of spirituality, study some Jungism. Carl Jung, right? That's it. Do some yoga to teach yourself discipline, how to concentrate. All the other stuff that you're talking about, counterproductive. Pure and simple. I'm not even hating. I'm just go by observing. So this is Siris King. Until next time, peace.